International Women's Day 2020 has come and gone. This year, as usual, we were bombarded with women's issues from our Australian and world political leaders, who continue to patronise us about the unacceptability of gender discrimination on behalf of feminist women who bemoan any disadvantage compared to men. Feminist women who refuse to accept the most fundamental principle of gender equality in a society which continues to deny the very existence of discrimination against men and continues to deny men the opportunity to pursue equality with women. Since the beginning of humanity, it is men who have suffered the ultimate act of sex discrimination. It is men's lives which are considered less important than women. In 1912, the Titanic sunk with a huge loss of life. Captain Smith gave the order, women and children first. With that order, 89% of the people who died were men, 7% were women, and 4% children. To this day, there is a failure to recognise this as the ultimate act of sex discrimination, which was perpetrated at gunpoint by men against other men. To this day, ships' evacuation procedures continue to give priority to women. The First and Second World War claimed the lives of millions of men who were socially expected and sometimes conscripted to fight in frontline military service for the ideologies of their political leaders. It is only in the last decade our military has allowed frontline service for women, but even now the overwhelming burden of military deaths is borne by men. In the recent Gulf Wars, it is reported 97.5% of US military deaths were men compared to 2.5% women. In 2014, Sam DiBrito wrote an article entitled "How to Die at Work, Be Male," and reported in 2012 95% of workplace fatalities were men. In Australia, approximately 67% of murder victims are men, 33% women. The Australian Bureau of Statistics reports in 2016 5.4% of men were the victims of violence, compared to 3.5% of women. The OECD reported in 2016 women accounted for 56% of health spending. As men, we cannot even trust our own governments.
7 women in Australia lost their lives to violence.
To spend the same amount of money on men's health compared to women. Our government and society continue to place a greater level of importance on women's health, safety and well-being, all of which continues to provide women with a life expectancy approximately 4 years longer than men.
Is killed by a partner or former partner in Australia. 1 in 4 Australian women has experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 4.
Whilst women celebrate progress for women over the last century, there is still no government campaign to reduce the overwhelming burden of military deaths by men. There is no campaign to reduce the number of workplace deaths by men. There is no campaign for gender equality on sinking ships. There is no campaign to reduce the number of male victims of murder or violence. There is no campaign for equality in health spending. There is no campaign to increase male life expectancy. There is still no minister for men. Instead, the federal government continues with its campaign in 2020. Violence against women, let's stop it at the start. The pursuit of gender equality has rendered our governments to be fixated with the concept gender equality should be selectively applied to the exclusive benefit of women, whilst the most fundamental concepts of equality for men continue to be totally, completely and utterly ignored.
Disrespect. The excuses we make allow it to grow. Violence against women. Let's stop it at the start.
When Julia Gillard made her speech on misogyny and sexism by the leader of the opposition, her male predecessors had appointed a Minister for Women, in an unbroken tradition which had dated nearly 30 years.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
It was incumbent on Julia Gillard, as the first female Prime Minister of Australia, to appoint a Minister for Men, which she did not.
Repulsive double standards. Repulsive double standards when it comes to misogyny and sexism.
Julia Gillard failed to understand the most fundamental principle of gender equality, or take the most rudimentary steps to ensure its application to both genders.
And of course, I was offended too by the sexism, by the misogyny of the...
Julia Gillard instead chose to give us all a lecture on feminist, sexist hypocrisy from the highest public office as Australian Prime Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition says do something. Well, he could do something himself. If he wants to deal with sexism in this parliament, he could change his behaviour, he could apologise for all these past statements.
There are many more gender equality issues which adversely affect men, from the family court to higher education, our criminal courts, our workplaces, paternity testing, male genital mutilation, age at retirement, false accusations in a pro-feminist society. There are biological differences which deny men the right to decide to have children. We are patronised in magazines, television and movies. The basis of our romantic relationships determine we negotiate a minefield to pander to the sensibilities of women whilst we are treated with contempt. On a daily basis, we are forced to accept a double standard based on gender which favours women and permeates every aspect of our lives.
And I'm passionate about this because I truly see myself in these girls.
The pursuit of feminist gender equality has rendered men as second-class citizens. Men are not treated equally. Men are not entitled to be treated equally. That privilege continues to be the exclusive circumstance for women, all of which has been legislated by the Australian government since the introduction of the Sex Discrimination Act in 1984.
We talked about what male privilege means, what white privilege means.
Catherine Q. Becker is accused of cutting off her husband's penis with a knife, taking his penis and throwing it into the garbage disposal.
As we mark International Women's Day 2020, we mark the end of another decade to add to the century of the pursuit of gender equality for the exclusive benefit of only one gender. In a world which has rallied to the circumstance of women, a rally cry made by the man-blaming sexist hypocrites of the feminist movement and now echoed by our political leaders throughout the world.
Hysterical! But however, I think I would have just thrown it in the dog's bowl.
Why does the dog have to suffer?
I can say that there is no one country in the world where all women can expect to receive these rights. No country in the world can yet say that they have achieved gender equality.
To parody the words of Emma Watson in her He for She speech to the United Nations in 2014, where she is sad to say there is no nation on earth who claims to have achieved equality for women. I am sad to say there is no nation on earth who has even begun to pursue the true basis of gender equality.
To have leaders such as President Kagame of Rwanda continue to be a role model of a country which has a parliamentary system comprised of 64% female leaders. I mean, it's the highest of any government in the world, and it's unbelievable.
First, because gender equality is a fundamental human right.